How many of you have ever been in a position or a place, a city, where you actually did experience beggars? People, yeah, you can raise your hands. People who, it wasn't just a handout for the day. They weren't just collecting for some cause, but literally you knew as you saw and heard and assessed the situation that they were begging in order to survive. And how did you feel? Could be a whole variety of things. Maybe you resented the intrusion of their begging. Maybe you were bothered by the division of what compassion would lead you to do, but the agenda of where you were going and what you wanted to accomplish. Maybe you were dismissive as if somehow they were inferior to you because of their station in life. What do you suppose it was like to sit in the dirt outside Jericho day after day and beg for someone to stop what they were doing long enough to pay attention to what you needed in that moment instead of just ignoring you and passing by? Can you imagine how you'd feel if that's the way you survived the day? And then, at the end of that day, contingent on someone being merciful, you rose the next morning to do it again just to survive one more day? The life of a beggar. That was Bartimaeus. In what Barb read for us earlier from Ephesians, Paul says, I pray that the eyes of your heart would be enlightened so that you would know the hope of your calling, the riches of God's glorious inheritance, and the strength of his power that is at work in you. It's easy to be blind. On many levels, it's easy to be blind to all kinds of truth, to our own circumstances. I read a quote this week that said, if only our eyes saw souls instead of bodies, how different our ideals of beauty would be. There are many ways to be blind. So in the story we're sharing this morning in our worship, there is this underlying or permeating paradox that the seeing people are blind and the blind man, Bartimaeus, sees. Have you ever wondered this? Have you ever wondered, why don't some see it? Who Jesus is? Why don't some understand the desperate need we have for grace? Grace is so rich and good. It soothes my spirit and my soul. It lifts my shame. It gives me some place to dump my junk. Why don't some see it that the grace of God saves us? It says in 2 Corinthians 4 that the prince of this world has blinded the eyes of those who do not believe, so that they don't see the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So the people, this crowd that were on the heels of Jesus, pressing against him everywhere he went, had good sight. They could see, but they missed the full truth of his identity. They also missed the intrinsic value of every person that lives on the face of the planet. And that's my blindness often too. But Bartimaeus had great insight. It's interesting how desperation and personal pain are powerful teachers. Isn't it true that when I am most broken or most vividly aware of my flaws, I see most clearly how beautiful Jesus is? They missed their need for Jesus. That's why they didn't ever believe in him as God or Savior. As I was thinking about that, I was reminded of a passage in Revelation chapter 3, where John, speaking the voice of Jesus, says this. And it's to the church at Laodicea, which, by the way, Laodicea was known for three things. They had a tremendous banking industry. There was great wealth in the city. They had a very ambitious textile industry. They had lots of clothing. And then Laodicea had some eye salve that was famous to the whole culture. So think about that as you listen to these words. I know your deeds, you're neither cold or hot. I wish you were cold or hot, but because you're lukewarm, not hot or cold, I spit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I'm rich, I'm wealthy, and have need of nothing. And you don't know that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. So I advise you to acquire from me gold refined by fire so that you may be truly rich, white garments to clothe the shame of your nakedness, and eye salve to anoint your eyes so that you may really see. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice and open the door, I'll come in. Do you understand that you are naked and poor without Jesus Christ? I forget it. The preacher forgets the profound truth of why I desperately need Jesus Christ. So I want to talk for a few minutes about what the blind man, the blind beggar, saw. Bartimaeus saw the true identity of Jesus. Son of David, he cries. That was a term for the Messiah. In 2 Samuel 7, it gives this whole description of who the Messiah would be. That he'd give victory over all enemies, that he would establish an age of peace and prosperity, that he would give to them as their king a place to call their own, and that God, through this king, would establish his reign forever. So all the people of Jesus' time had that backdrop of a messianic expectation, a messianic age that they longed for that would deliver them from their personal circumstances of struggle or brokenness. So when Bartimaeus, in his desperation as the beggar sitting in the dirt, learns that Jesus, who heals and casts out demons and feeds the 5,000 and does miracles, is coming by, he will not be deterred. Son of David, have mercy on me. I find it interesting that in the video there was this phrase that said, a beggar can only wait for mercy to come. Bartimaeus saw that in the face of Jesus. The blind beggar also saw that he was his only hope. Jesus was his only hope. This week, because of the story we're unpacking together, I Googled famous blind people. You'll remember some of these famous people. Homer, who wrote the Greek poetry. John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost. Louis Braille, who created a way for blind people to read. Fanny Crosby, who wrote hundreds of Christian hymns. Ray Charles. Who can hear that name without starting to think, oh, it's crying time again? Helen Keller, Andre Bocelli, the wonderful tenor, Stevie Wonder. Here's one I hadn't heard of, Tofiri Kibuka. Born in Ghana, later immigrated to Norway, he was the first blind man to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. He also was a Paralympic competitor. He would compete as a blind man in cross-country skiing and long-distance running. Well, all these people that I just named for you, though they were blind, they didn't wallow in self-pity. Somehow, even with their blindness, maybe motivated by their blindness, they did unbelievably noteworthy things. Now, I only paint that picture to say blind Bartimaeus is the opposite. He's in a period of time where the only way he can survive is to sit in the dirt and beg and hope for somebody to be merciful. And so when he hears that Jesus, the Son of David, is coming by, he knows that Jesus is his only hope. Has the circumstance of your life ever been such that you realized, Jesus, unless you help me, I'm lost? That's what a blind man sees. So he refused to be silenced by the crowd's definition that he did not have enough value to bother the master. We, as the followers of Jesus, need to embrace the vision of the Messiah, Jesus, that every person you lay eyes on is precious and important to our Heavenly Father who gave them life. Don't be dismissive of any person that you see, for they are loved by God, the Creator. The third thing the blind beggar saw was Jesus stop the parade. Why did that crowd follow him anyway? It was because of the sensational, unbelievable things Jesus did. It was because of the supernatural miracles. It was because of his compelling words. They hung on every word and pressed as close as they could so they wouldn't miss anything. And they kept telling Bartimaeus, keep quiet, keep quiet. What they maybe are saying is, you keep quiet so I can experience this sensational relationship with Jesus. But the blind beggar saw that Jesus stopped the parade when the broken man cried for mercy. The fourth thing the blind beggar saw was that the all-powerful servant, omnipotent servant, how's that for an oxymoron? The omnipotent servant was willing to use his power and love to serve the needs of those who needed it most and deserved it the least. I'm going to say it again because it's a good thought. That the omnipotent servant, the Lord of the universe, was willing to release his power and love to serve the needs of the one who needed it the most and deserved it the least. So here's this beautiful and gripping question. That the Lord of the universe stands before a blind beggar and says, what do you want me to do for you? Now, if you haven't grasped it yet, I also am the blind beggar. And you are the blind beggar. And Jesus Christ comes before you in all his power and all his love and stands before you and says, "What do you want me to do for you?" It's almost more than this little Norwegian brain can grasp. The blind beggar also then experienced and saw that Jesus has the power to meet his needs at a deeper level than just physical sight. Imagine how all of life changed for him in a moment. And yet, as Alice alluded to with the children, there had to have been a gratitude and a joy that couldn't be put into words. And in that moment, Bartimaeus realized he's more than a miracle worker. I'm in the presence of God. And from now on, I want my life to walk in the shadow of his company forever. And he follows him. I want to close with a story from the skiing world. Olympic skier Danelle Umstead can't see when she skis down the mountain. It's a fascinating story. She instead has to ski on the heels of her guide and husband, Rob Umstead. It's scary all the time going downhill and not being able to see, Danelle says. We ski up to 70 miles an hour, and I'm 100% relying on my husband, she said. As her guide, Rob skis right in front of her, calling out commands. My job is to be her eyes, he said. I'm basically thinking out loud, telling her everything that's happening, and if I do my job well and give her a good description, she can be aggressive and anticipate what's coming. If I don't do my job well, she's left second-guessing every second down the mountain. So they use Bluetooth headsets to communicate down the slopes. And they skied all the way to a bronze medal in the Olympics, the Paralympics. We've learned a lot through skiing, she said. We've learned to trust and communicate because every day is different and every course is different. And our communication has to change and adapt, and the terrain changes, and it's scary and it's wonderful, and I like it. Why do I tell you that story? Because if Jesus Christ has opened the eyes of your heart so that you are enlightened to see the truth of your need as a blind beggar, and he as the one who is the mother lode of the power of life and love to give you purpose in life and to forgive your sin and to claim you as his son or daughter, then faith begins to follow Jesus, listening intently for Christ's voice to instruct us every step of the life journey. And there is an intrinsic interdependence that I can't ski blind. I can't face life by myself. I have to trust Jesus. So Jesus Christ is still in the business of healing blind eyes and restoring wounded souls. Jesus is still in the business of inviting us to follow. And I will follow him. And he stands before you this morning and says, "What do you want me to do for you?" And then as he touches you with grace at the most acute point of your wounded soul's needs, then with eyes wide open, you too would say, "Jesus, I'll follow you all the days of my life. My life belongs to you."